The shot rang out just as Wilhelmina Nash stuffed the last letter into her leather satchel, the bullet splintering the wooden post beside her head. Without flinching, she mounted her dappled mare and kicked into a gallop, the precious mail secure against her chest, as she fled from Skidoo's post office into the unforgiving Nevada desert, her reputation for fearlessness earning its keep once again. The year was 1876, and delivering mail through the untamed territories between mining settlements was considered suicide by most men. But Wilhelmina Willie, to those who knew her well, had been riding these routes for 2 years without surrendering a single letter to bandits or the elements. At 25, she had already outlived both her parents, burying her father just last winter after consumption took him, leaving her with nothing but his old Colt revolver and the mail contract he'd worked so hard to secure. "Keep your head low and your horse fast," she muttered to herself, repeating her father's mantra as she guided her mare, Penny, around a rocky outcropping. The Nevada territory stretched before her, harsh and beautiful in the morning light. Her route today would take her from Skidoo to 3 smaller mining camps and finally to Silver Creek. 40 miles of barren landscape crawling with outlaws eager to intercept valuable correspondence and packages. Willie slowed Penny to a steady trot once she was confident no one was following. The morning sun beat down on her wide-brimmed hat, the only concession to femininity being the faded blue ribbon tied around its crown. Her canvas trousers and sturdy boots were practical choices that had raised eyebrows when she first took over her father's route. But now the sight of male Willie was as common as tumbleweeds in these parts. She was halfway to the first stop when she noticed the dust cloud rising behind her. Riders, multiple horses moving fast. "Come on, Penny," she urged, spurring the mare faster, though she knew outrunning multiple horses was unlikely. Her hand moved to the revolver at her hip, a last resort she'd used only twice in her career. The riders gained ground quickly. As they drew nearer, Willie could make out 3 men, their faces obscured by bandanas. The Hawkins Gang, most likely they'd been terrorizing mail carriers across 3 territories. She veered sharply toward a narrow pass between 2 rock formations, hoping to force them to ride single file, giving her a better chance if it came to shooting. The first bullet whistled past her ear just as she reached the pass. "Stop right there, male girl," one of the men shouted. "We just want what you're carrying, not your life." Willie drew her revolver but kept riding. She'd heard similar promises before, promises that often ended with shallow graves for those foolish enough to believe them. Just as she cleared the pass, another rider appeared ahead of her, emerging from behind a large boulder. Her heart sank. They'd outflanked her, but something was different about this 4th rider. He wasn't wearing a bandana, and instead of pointing a weapon at her, he was charging directly toward the pursuing gang. "Get down!" the stranger yelled as he galloped past her, firing 2 quick shots at the outlaws. Willie didn't hesitate. She ducked low in her saddle as bullets flew overhead, the stranger engaging her pursuers with deadly precision. 2 of the bandits fell from their horses while the 3rd wheeled around and fled back the way they'd come. When the gunfire ceased, Willie straightened and turned Penny around. The stranger was dismounting beside the fallen outlaws, checking for signs of life. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his worn Stetson. His movements were efficient, practiced military, perhaps. "They're dead," he called out, not looking up from his grim task. "The 3rd one got away. He'll likely bring friends." Willie approached cautiously, her revolver still drawn. "Who are you?" The man stood, finally turning to face her. His eyes were startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin, and a thin scar ran along his jawline. He couldn't have been more than 30. Isaac Calloway, he said, tipping his hat, was passing through when I heard the shots. His gaze fell to her mail satchel. You must be the mail carrier folks talk about. Wilhelmina Nash, she replied, still not holstering her weapon. Most call me Willie. Thank you for your help, Mr. Calloway, but I need to keep moving. Isaac nodded, mounting his Palomino stallion with fluid grace. Mind if I ride along? That third bandit will be back with reinforcements before long. Willie studied him, weighing her options. She'd made it this far relying on herself, but the territory had grown increasingly dangerous. The Hawkins Gang had never come after her so boldly before. I don't need a protector, Mr. Calloway. Never said you did, Miss Nash. But 4 eyes are better than 2, and from what I've seen, you've got precious cargo that folks are mighty interested in. Willie considered this. There was something in his manner direct, but not presuming that she found herself trusting despite her better judgment. Fine, she finally said, holstering her weapon. But I set the pace, and I make the decisions about the route. Isaac smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise. They rode in silence for the next hour, Willie leading the way while Isaac rode slightly behind and to her right, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. She stole glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. His clothes were dusty but of good quality, and his gun belt showed signs of regular care. Not a drifter then, something else. Where are you from, Mr. Calloway? She asked eventually, curiosity getting the better of her. Missouri originally, he answered. Been all over since the war, though. The war? That explains the way you handle yourself, he nodded. Cavalry, you learn quick or you don't learn at all. And what brings you to Nevada territory? Isaac was quiet for a moment, looking for someone. The brevity of his answer suggested he didn't want to elaborate, and Willie didn't press. Everyone in these lands had stories they preferred to keep buried. They reached the first mining camp by midday. Copper Basin was little more than 20 tents, and a few wooden structures huddled around a meager water source. Willie dismounted outside the largest building, which served as both store and gathering place. Won't take but a minute, she said to Isaac, who remained mounted. I'll keep watch, he replied, eyes already tracking the movements of the miners who had stopped their work to stare at the newcomers. Inside, Willie delivered letters to the camp supervisor, a heavy-set man named Hargrove who had always treated her with grudging respect. Heard the Hawkins Gang hit the Silver Creek stage 2 days back, Hargrove said as he sorted through the correspondence. Took the payroll for the midnight mine, $10,000. They tried for me this morning, Willie replied. Outside of Skidoo. Hargrove looked up sharply. And you're still standing. With the mail intact, had some unexpected help. She nodded toward the door. Stranger rode in at the right moment. Hargrove peered through the grimy window at Isaac. You trust him? I trust that he saved my life today. Beyond that. She shrugged. Well, be careful. Times like these, folks do desperate things. He handed her a small bundle of outgoing letters. Give my regards to Abigail when you reach Silver Creek. Willie nodded, tucking the new mail into her satchel. Abigail Thornton was Hargrove's niece and the only female friend Willie had in these parts. Outside, Isaac was exactly as she'd left him, vigilant and composed in his saddle. Any trouble? She asked. Just curious looks, ready to move on. The second stop was smaller than the first, just a handful of prospectors trying their luck at a played-out claim. Willie made quick work of her deliveries, aware of the sun tracking west and the need to reach shelter before nightfall. As they rode toward the third stop, Willie noticed Isaac growing increasingly alert, his hand resting near his holster. Something wrong? She asked, scanning the horizon herself. Not sure, he replied. Just a feeling. Willie had learned to trust such feelings. There's a cutoff ahead. Adds an hour to the journey but keeps us out of open ground. Isaac nodded. Lead the way. The detour took them through a narrow canyon with high walls that provided cover, but also limited their escape options if ambushed. Willie rode tensely, one hand on her reins, the other ready to draw at a moment's notice. Isaac had fallen silent, his entire being focused on their surroundings. When they emerged from the canyon without incident, Willie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The third mining camp, Iron Ridge, was visible in the distance, smoke from its smelting operations rising against the late afternoon sky. Almost there, she said. Iron Ridge has proper buildings and even a small hotel. We can rest the horses before pushing on to Silver Creek tomorrow. Isaac nodded, but his expression remained troubled. Miss Nash, I should tell you something. Before he could continue, the crack of a rifle echoed across the landscape. Isaac reacted instantly, throwing himself from his horse and pulling Willie down with him just as another shot kicked up dirt where they had been riding. Sharpshooter, he muttered, drawing his revolver. On the ridge to the north. Willie peered in that direction, seeing nothing but the rocky outcropping about 300 yards away. How many? Just one, I think. But they've got the high ground and a long gun. Another shot struck Penny's saddle, causing the mare to rear in panic. Willie lunged for the reins, calming her horse while keeping her head down. We're pinned, she said, assessing their limited cover, just a shallow depression in the earth and their horses. Not for long. Isaac crawled to his saddlebag, extracting a brass spyglass. After a quick survey of the ridge, he tucked it away and checked his revolver. I'm going to circle around. There's a path up the backside of that ridge. I'll go with you, Willie said immediately. Isaac shook his head. One moves faster than two. Keep the horses here and be ready to ride when I signal. Before she could protest, he added, I've done this before, Miss Nash. She wanted to argue but recognized the logic in his plan. Fine. But if you're not back in 20 minutes, I'm coming after you. Isaac flashed a brief smile. Fair enough. He removed his hat and set it beside her. Hold this for me. Without waiting for an answer, he slipped away, using the contours of the land to stay out of the sharpshooter's line of sight. Willie watched until he disappeared behind a stand of scrubby juniper trees, then turned her attention to calming the horses and checking her own weapon. The minutes stretched painfully. Twice more the rifle fired, seemingly at random, as if the shooter was trying to flush them out. Willie held her position, counting seconds and watching the sun sink lower toward the horizon. 18 minutes had passed when she heard a different gunshot, the distinctive report of a revolver, not a rifle. Then silence. Willie tensed, ready to mount and either flee or go after Isaac, depending on what happened next. Her hand tightened on her father's Colt. A figure appeared on the ridge. Even at this distance, she recognized Isaac's tall form. He waved once, signaling the all clear. Relief flooded through her, though she quickly suppressed it. She hadn't known this man long enough to warrant such concern for his safety, she told herself. By the time Isaac returned, leading his horse, the sun was kissing the western mountains. Hawkins Gang. Willie asked, handing back his hat. Isaac shook his head, his expression grim. Hired gun, professional, he hesitated. He wasn't after the mail, Willie, he was after you. The use of her familiar name barely registered against the shock of his words. What? That makes no sense. Found this on him. Isaac handed her a folded paper. It was a crude wanted poster with a sketch of her face and the words $500 reward Wilhelmina Nash alive printed beneath. Willie stared at the paper, her mind racing. Who would? Why? He didn't know. Just said some fella in Silver Creek was paying top dollar. Isaac's eyes hardened. Someone wants you stopped, but they want to do the stopping themselves. Willie folded the poster and tucked it into her pocket, her thoughts immediately going to the mail she carried. Was there something specific in this delivery that someone didn't want reaching its destination? "We need to keep moving," she said, mounting Penny with practiced ease. "Iron Ridge before dark, then we figure this out." Isaac swung into his saddle. "You still plan to continue to Silver Creek?" "Even knowing someone there wants to harm you," Willie met his gaze steadily. "I haven't failed to deliver the mail yet, Mr. Calloway. I don't intend to start now." Something like admiration flickered in Isaac's eyes. "Then I'll ride beside you." "I didn't ask for your help," she reminded him, though there was less edge to her words than before. "No," he agreed, urging his horse forward. "You didn't." They reached Iron Ridge as dusk was settling over the mining camp. Unlike the previous stops, Iron Ridge boasted a proper street with several permanent buildings, including a general store, a saloon, and the small hotel Willie had mentioned. The postmaster, Elias Greaves, was closing up when they arrived. He was a thin man with spectacles and a permanently worried expression that deepened when he saw Willie's dusty, disheveled appearance. "Good heavens, Miss Nash, we'd given up on seeing you today after word came about the Hawkins Gang." "News travels fast," Willie observed, handing over her deliveries. "Telegraph line to Silver Creek was completed last month," Greaves explained, sorting through the mail. "Makes all the difference." He eyed Isaac curiously. "And your companion is?" "Isaac Calloway," Isaac said, extending his hand. "Just lending Miss Nash some assistance on the trail." Greaves shook the offered hand, his gaze speculative. "Well, we're grateful to see her arrive safely. The Anderson boy has been checking every hour for a letter from his sweetheart back east." While Greaves organized the outgoing mail, Willie took the opportunity to examine the contents of her satchel, looking for anything that might explain the bounty on her head. Among the remaining letters was a small package addressed to Judge Hamilton Crawford in Silver Creek, sender unlisted. It was sealed with wax bearing no distinguishing mark. "Something interesting?" Isaac asked quietly, noticing her focus on the package. Willie hesitated, then tucked it back into her satchel. "Maybe. I'll tell you once we're somewhere private." After completing her business with Greaves, Willie secured rooms at the hotel's separate accommodations, despite the proprietor's raised eyebrows at a woman traveling with a man not her husband. Isaac insisted on paying for his own room and for their dinner at the small eating house attached to the hotel. Over plates of surprisingly decent stew, Willie showed Isaac the package. "Judge Crawford is the circuit judge for this territory," she explained. "Honest man, from what I hear. Doesn't take bribes, doesn't bend the law for anyone." Isaac examined the package without opening it. Heavy for its size, could be documents, could be evidence. "That's what I'm thinking. Someone doesn't want whatever this is reaching the judge." Willie took a sip of her coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. "But putting a bounty on me seems extreme. Why not just try to steal it?" "They did," Isaac pointed out. "This morning, and then the sharpshooter this afternoon." "True," Willie conceded, "but wanting me alive suggests something else." Isaac leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "They want to know who sent it, or they want to be sure it hasn't been duplicated." Willie nodded slowly. "Either way, I need to get it to the judge." Isaac corrected. "I'm seeing this through, Miss Nash." She studied him across the table. In the lamplight, his features were softer, the scar along his jaw less prominent. There was something in his steady gaze that made her want to trust him completely, a dangerous feeling for a woman who had survived by relying solely on herself. "Why?" she asked directly. "Why are you helping me? And don't say you were just passing through. Nobody just passes through this God-forsaken stretch of desert." Isaac set down his fork, his expression becoming guarded. That's fair. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. I'm a U.S. Marshal, Miss Nash. I've been tracking the Hawkins Gang for the past 3 months. Willie stared at him, shock giving way to a flicker of betrayal. You lied to me. I didn't identify myself, that's true, but everything else I've told you is genuine. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. The gang hit a bank in Reno last month. Killed 2 people, including a young deputy. I've been on their trail ever since. So you used me as bait, Willie concluded, anger rising in her chest. You knew they'd come after the mail carrier. Isaac shook his head emphatically. No. I was following a lead to Silver Creek when I heard the gunshots this morning. Finding you was coincidence, though I recognized you immediately from descriptions in town. Willie wasn't entirely convinced. And the shooter today? Not connected to my investigation as far as I can tell. But it concerns me greatly. His expression softened. I should have told you sooner. I apologize for that. Willie considered his words, trying to separate her sense of betrayal from the practical reality of their situation. A U.S. Marshal was exactly the ally she needed right now, regardless of how they'd come to ride together. I suppose having a lawman along isn't the worst thing given the circumstances, she finally said. Relief flickered across his features. I promise you, Miss Nash, my priority is your safety. Willie, she corrected, surprising herself. If we're going to be dodging bullets together, you might as well use my name. A small smile touched his lips. Willie it is, then. They finished their meal discussing plans for the next day's journey. Silver Creek was still a good 20 miles away, through increasingly mountainous terrain that offered plenty of opportunities for ambush. We should leave at first light, Isaac suggested. Take the high trail. It's longer but offers better visibility. Willie agreed, though she was all too aware that their chances of reaching Silver Creek without further incident were slim. Someone was determined to stop her, and they clearly had resources at their disposal. Back at the hotel, Isaac insisted on checking both their rooms before allowing Willie to retire. His thoroughness might have irritated her under normal circumstances, but after the day's events, she found his caution reassuring. I'll be right across the hall if you need anything, he said, standing in her doorway. Try to get some rest. Willie nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. You too, Marshal. A hint of a smile touched his lips at her use of his title. Isaac, he corrected. If we're going to be dodging bullets together. She couldn't help returning his smile. Good night, Isaac. Good night, Willie. Alone in her room, Willie placed the mysterious package under her pillow before preparing for bed. As she washed the day's dust from her face and hands in the basin of cool water, she found her thoughts returning to Isaac Calloway. There was more to his story. She was certain something personal driving his pursuit of the Hawkins Gang. But she was equally certain he was genuinely concerned for her safety. It had been a long time since anyone had looked out for her. Since her father's death, she'd been entirely on her own, taking pride in her independence even as she sometimes ached with loneliness on the long rides between settlements. Having someone else to rely on, even temporarily, was both unsettling and oddly comforting. She fell asleep thinking of blue eyes and the way they crinkled at the corners when their owner smiled. Willie woke before dawn, instantly alert. Something had disturbed her sleep, a sound, perhaps, or simply the instinct that had kept her alive on the trail. She lay still, listening intently. The hotel was quiet, but there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there when she'd fallen asleep. Silently, she slipped from beneath the covers, still fully dressed except for her boots. She'd learned long ago never to undress completely in unfamiliar surroundings. The package was still under her pillow. She tucked it securely into an inner pocket of her jacket before retrieving her revolver from beneath the bed, A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside her room. Willie froze, her breath catching. The footsteps were trying to be stealthy but failing due to the old building's noisy construction. They paused outside her door. Willie raised her revolver, aiming at the center of the wooden panel. Then, barely audible, came a soft knock, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones. Isaac's signal, arranged before they'd parted for the night. Willie exhaled slowly, lowering her weapon and moving to unlock the door. Isaac stood in the dimly lit hallway, fully dressed and armed, his expression grave. "We need to go," he whispered. "Now, what's happening?" She asked, already reaching for her boots. "Riders coming into town, 6 of them." The night clerk recognized one as Jake Hawkins himself. He handed her the leather satchel containing the remainder of her mail. "They're checking the livery first, but it won't take them long to start searching the hotel." Willie nodded, lacing her boots with practiced efficiency. "Backstairs. Too obvious. There's a window at the end of the hall that opens onto the roof of the general store. We can cross to the next building and down into the alley." It was a risky plan, but better than trying to fight their way past 6 armed outlaws. Willie grabbed her hat and followed Isaac into the hallway, moving as quietly as possible toward the window he'd mentioned. The old sash protested with a groan when Isaac pushed it upward, causing both of them to freeze. When no sounds of alarm came from below, he eased it the rest of the way open and slipped outside, helping Willie navigate the short drop onto the adjacent roof. The pre-dawn air was cool, the sky just beginning to lighten in the east. They crouched low, making their way across the flat roof of the general store to where it connected with a lower building that housed the assayer's office. "The horses," Willie whispered as they prepared to descend to the alley. "Already taken care of," Isaac assured her. "Had them moved to the blacksmith shed after you retired. They're saddled and waiting." She was impressed by his foresight but didn't have time to say so. A shout from the street indicated their absence had been discovered. "Down. Now," Isaac urged, helping her over the edge of the roof. Willie lowered herself carefully, dropping the final few feet to the ground. Isaac followed, landing beside her with minimal noise. The blacksmith shed was on the other side of the alley, a dark, squat building that smelled of coal and hot metal even when the forge was cold. They slipped inside to find their horses waiting just as Isaac had promised. "Which way?" Willie asked, mounting Penny with practiced ease. "East," Isaac decided. "Away from Silver Creek for now. We'll circle back when we've lost them." Willie hesitated. "But the judge will still be there tomorrow," Isaac finished. "We'll deliver your package, I promise. But right now we need to focus on staying alive." She couldn't argue with his logic. Nodding her agreement, she followed Isaac as he led them out the back of the shed and into the gray light of early morning. They rode hard for the first hour, keeping to rocky ground where possible to make their trail harder to follow. As the sun climbed higher, Isaac guided them into a narrow canyon where a small stream provided water for themselves and their horses. "We'll rest here for a bit," he said, dismounting. "The horses need it, and we need to plan our next move." Willie slid from Penny's back, her muscles protesting after the tense ride. She led the mare to the stream, allowing her to drink while she refilled her own canteen. "How did they find us so quickly?" she asked, joining Isaac where he sat on a flat boulder, studying a worn map. "Not sure," he admitted. "Could be they were already headed to Iron Ridge and our presence was just bad luck, or we have a traitor in our midst," Willie finished grimly. "The postmaster, the hotel clerk, could be either." News of a woman mail carrier traveling with a stranger would spread fast in a small settlement. He traced a route on the map. "We're here. Silver Creek is there. The direct route will be watched." Willie studied the map, noting the rugged terrain between their position and their destination. "What about Miller's Pass? It adds 10 miles but comes in from the north. They might not expect us from that direction." Isaac considered, then nodded. "Good thinking. It's rough country but navigable." He folded the map and tucked it away. "We should reach the pass by midday if we push on now." As they prepared to depart, Willie noticed Isaac checking his revolver with methodical care. The weapon was well maintained but had clearly seen extensive use. "Army issue?" she asked, nodding toward the gun. Isaac shook his head. "My father's. He was a lawman too before the war." Something flickered in his expression, an old grief, perhaps. "He taught me to shoot when I was 12. Said a steady hand and a cool head would serve me better than quick drawing ever would." "Sounds like my father," Willie said softly. "He always said the mail would get through if I kept my wits about me." She patted the revolver at her hip. This was his, my inheritance, along with the mail contract. Isaac's gaze was warm with understanding. "He'd be proud to see you now." The simple words touched Willie more deeply than she'd expected. "I hope so," she replied, turning away to adjust Penny's saddle to hide the sudden moisture in her eyes. They rode in companionable silence for the next few hours, the terrain gradually becoming more rugged as they approached Miller's Pass. The narrow trail wound between towering rock formations, offering shade from the midday sun, but also creating perfect positions for ambush. "Stay alert," Isaac cautioned unnecessarily as they entered the pass. "We're vulnerable here." Willie nodded, her eyes constantly scanning the rocks above them. The package in her inner pocket felt suddenly heavier, its contents still a mystery but clearly valuable enough to warrant the pursuit they'd experienced. They were halfway through the pass when Isaac suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. Willie reined in Penny, listening intently. "Hear that?" Isaac whispered. At first, Willie heard nothing but the soft nickering of their horses and the whisper of wind through the rocks. Then she caught at the faint but unmistakable sound of metal striking stone, as if someone had dislodged a small rock while moving into position above them. "Ambush," she breathed, already reaching for her revolver. Isaac nodded grimly, dismounting and motioning for her to do the same. They led their horses to a small alcove in the rock wall where the animals would have some protection. "Stay here," Isaac instructed. "I'm going to try to outflank them." "No," Willie countered firmly. "We stay together." Before he could argue, a voice echoed through the pass. "Marshal Calloway, we know you're there. You and the male girl." Isaac tensed, his expression darkening. "Hawkins." "You've been a thorn in my side long enough, Marshal," the voice continued. "But today's your lucky day. We don't want you just the package the girl is carrying. Hand it over and you both ride away." Willie exchanged a glance with Isaac. "They know you're a marshal," she whispered. "And they know about the package." Isaac nodded, his jaw tight. "Confirms my suspicion about a leak in Iron Ridge." He raised his voice to respond to Hawkins. "What's so important about this package that you're willing to risk hanging for it, Jake?" A harsh laugh echoed down. "That's my business, lawman. Just know there are people who'll pay handsomely to make sure Judge Crawford never sees what's inside." "People like who?" Isaac pressed, using the conversation to try to pinpoint Hawkins' location among the rocks above. "Important people. The kind that can make a man rich or dead." There was a pause. "Last chance, Marshal. Send the girl out with the package and I'll let you both live." "He's lying," Willie murmured. "Of course he is," Isaac agreed. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I need you to trust me." Willie met his gaze steadily. "I do." Something flickered in his eyes at her response, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. He nodded once, then outlined his plan in hushed tones. Minutes later, Willie was moving slowly out into the open, her hands raised, apparently surrendering. The package was visible in her outstretched palm. "I'm coming out, Hawkins," she called. "Don't shoot." From his hidden position farther back in the pass, Isaac watched as Willie played her part perfectly. She moved with deliberate slowness, appearing frightened but resolute, drawing all attention to herself while he circled around using a narrow ledge he'd spotted earlier. "Smart girl," came Hawkins' voice. "Just leave the package on that flat rock and back away." Willie did as instructed, placing the small package on the indicated rock before retreating several steps. The tension in the pass was palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. A figure emerged from the rocks above a tall man with a full beard and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Jake Hawkins. He kept his rifle trained on Willie as he descended, moving with the confidence of a predator who believes his prey is cornered. "Where's the marshal?" Hawkins demanded, glancing around suspiciously. "Gone," Willie replied, her voice steady despite her vulnerable position. "Said he wasn't dying for a package." Hawkins laughed. "Smart man. Smarter than his reputation suggests." He approached the rock where the package lay, keeping his weapon aimed at Willie. "Though I'm surprised he left such a pretty thing behind." As Hawkins reached for the package, a shot rang out from above, striking the rock inches from his hand. He jerked back, cursing, as Isaac called out from his elevated position. "Step away from her, Hawkins." The outlaw leader dove for cover, shouting orders to his hidden men. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions, forcing Willie to scramble behind a boulder as bullets ricocheted around her. Isaac picked off one of Hawkins' men with careful aim, then another, using his elevated position to full advantage. But he was outnumbered, and Hawkins' remaining men were working to flank his position. Willie, seeing Isaac's predicament, made a decision. Drawing her father's revolver, she fired at a gunman who was moving to cut off Isaac's escape route. Her shot went wide, but it distracted the man long enough for Isaac to adjust his position and take him down with a well-placed bullet. "Willie, run!" Isaac shouted, providing covering fire as she dashed from her hiding place toward the horses. She reached Penny and was about to mount when she realized the package was still lying exposed on the flat rock. Without it, their entire journey would be meaningless. Making a split-second decision, Willie changed direction, sprinting toward the rock even as bullets kicked up dust around her feet. She snatched the package and dove behind a large boulder just as Hawkins himself emerged from cover, firing rapidly in her direction. One bullet grazed her upper arm, tearing her sleeve and drawing a thin line of blood, but the pain barely registered in her adrenaline-fueled state. "Isaac!" she called out. "I've got it." From his position above, Isaac had a clear view of the situation Willie pinned down, Hawkins and one remaining gunman moving to surround her, and their horses too far away for her to reach safely. Making a quick calculation, he holstered his revolver and took a running leap from his ledge, landing hard on a lower outcropping before dropping to the ground between the outlaws and Willie's position. He rolled to his feet, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion and firing twice. The remaining gunman fell, but Hawkins had already taken cover behind a large boulder. "It's over, Jake," Isaac called out, moving to Willie's side. "Your men are down. Surrender now." Hawkins' response was a bullet that splintered rock near Isaac's head. "Not a chance, Marshal." "I'm not hanging for anyone." Willie tugged at Isaac's sleeve. "The horses," she whispered. "If we can reach them." A movement caught her eye, Hawkins making a dash for a narrow side passage. Isaac saw it too and fired, but the outlaw leader had already disappeared into the crevice. "He's circling around," Isaac said grimly, "trying to cut us off from the horses." Willie checked her revolver, 3 bullets left. "What's the plan?" Isaac scanned their surroundings, his expression determined. "I'll draw his fire, you make for the horses, and leave you." "No." Willie, his voice softened despite the urgency of their situation. That package needs to reach the judge. Whatever's in it is important enough to kill for. She knew he was right, but the thought of leaving him to face Hawkins alone was unacceptable for reasons she wasn't ready to examine. Together, she insisted. We move together. Before he could argue further, a shot rang out from a new direction. Hawkins had indeed circled around and now had a clear line to their horses. Penny reared in fright as the bullet struck near her hooves. He's trying to spook the horses, Isaac realized. If they run, we're on foot in outlaw territory, Willie finished grimly. Isaac nodded. I'll create a diversion. When I do run for Penny, don't look back, just ride. But he cut her off, his blue eyes intense. I'll be right behind you, I promise. Something in his expression made Willie believe him. She nodded, gripping her revolver tightly as she prepared to make her move. Isaac didn't hesitate. He fired 3 rapid shots in Hawkins' direction, forcing the outlaw to duck for cover, then sprinted across open ground, drawing the gunman's attention away from Willie and the horses. Willie seized her moment, dashing toward Penny. She reached the frightened mare, speaking soothing words as she quickly untied the reins and mounted. Looking back, she saw Isaac engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse with Hawkins, both men using the rocky terrain for cover as they exchanged fire. She should ride, she knew. Get the package to safety. But she couldn't leave Isaac. Making a swift decision, Willie urged Penny forward, circling wide to approach Hawkins from behind. The outlaw leader was so focused on Isaac that he didn't notice her until she was almost upon him. Hawkins, she shouted. He whirled, raising his weapon, but Willie was already firing. Her first shot missed. Her second struck his shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. As he recovered and aimed at her, a final shot rang out, Isaac striking Hawkins squarely in the chest. The outlaw leader staggered backward, a look of surprise on his weathered face, before collapsing to the ground. Silence fell over the pass, broken only by the nervous shifting of the horses and Willie's own rapid breathing. Isaac approached Hawkins cautiously, kicking away the fallen man's weapon before checking for signs of life. He's dead, Isaac confirmed, looking up at Willie. His expression was unreadable. You should have ridden out when you had the chance. Willie dismounted, leading Penny closer. And leave you to face him alone. Not a chance, Marshal. A ghost of a smile touched Isaac's lips. Stubborn woman. You're welcome, she replied dryly. The tension of the moment broke, and Isaac's smile widened into something genuine. Thank you, he said quietly, though it was reckless. Says the man who jumped from a cliff to save me. He conceded the point with a nod, then grew serious again. We should move. There might be more of them nearby. They retrieved Isaac's horse and continued through the pass, leaving the bodies of Hawkins and his men for the vultures. Neither spoke much as they rode, processing the events of the morning and the narrow escape they'd shared. By mid-afternoon, they had cleared the pass and were traversing rolling hills that would eventually give way to the valley, where Silver Creek nestled against the mountains. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, but both remained vigilant, aware that whoever had hired Hawkins might have other resources at their disposal. As they paused to rest the horses at a small stream, Willie finally addressed the question that had been nagging at her. Who do you think hired them? She asked, watching Isaac splash water on his face to clear away the dust of their journey. He straightened, considering. Someone powerful in Silver Creek, obviously. Someone with a lot to lose if whatever's in that package reaches Judge Crawford. Should we look? Willie suggested, pulling out the mysterious parcel. Might give us a better idea of what we're dealing with. Isaac hesitated, his lawman's respect for private correspondence warring with practical considerations. Finally, he nodded. Under the circumstances, I think it's justified. Willie carefully broke the wax seal and unwrapped the brown paper covering. Inside was a small wooden box, which opened to reveal a stack of papers and several photographs. "Land deeds," Isaac murmured, examining the documents, "and mining claims." His expression darkened as he studied the photographs. "These are pictures of the Silver Creek Town Council meeting with a man I recognize, Samuel Blackwood, representative of the Western Pacific Railroad." Willie peered at the images. They showed well-dressed men in what appeared to be clandestine meetings, exchanging papers and money. "Bribes. Looks that way." Isaac sifted through more documents. "According to these papers, the town council has been secretly selling land and mining rights to the railroad for personal profit, bypassing legal requirements and cheating the original owners. Including this deed," Willie noted, holding up one document, "belonging to Margaret Crawford." She looked up at Isaac. "Any relation to the judge, his wife," Isaac confirmed grimly. "She died last year. Her property was supposed to go to charity according to her will." He examined another document. Instead, it appears Councilman Edward Payne forged documents to claim the land, then sold it to the railroad. Willie let out a low whistle. No wonder they didn't want this reaching the judge. He'd have the whole council arrested. "And stop the railroad deal," Isaac added. "There are millions at stake." He carefully returned the documents to their box. "We need to get this to Judge Crawford immediately." "Silver Creek is still several hours away," Willie pointed out. "We won't arrive until after dark." Isaac nodded, securing the box in his saddlebag. "The judge lives on the north side of town. We'll avoid Main Street and approach from the hills." As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually transformed from rugged wilderness to rolling pasture-land. Occasional ranches dotted the hillsides, smoke rising from distant chimneys as they approached civilization. Willie found herself growing increasingly aware of Isaac riding beside her, the straight line of his back, the careful way he scanned their surroundings, the quiet competence that had saved their lives multiple times in the past 2 days. There was something comforting about his presence, something that made her feel safer than she had since her father's death. It was a dangerous feeling for a woman who had prided herself on self-reliance. "Tell me something, Isaac," she said, breaking the companionable silence. "What happens after we deliver this package? You return to marshalling and I go back to delivering mail." Isaac glanced at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "Is that what you want?" The question caught her off guard. What did she want? Before meeting Isaac, the answer had been simple: to fulfill her contract, to honor her father's legacy, to prove that a woman could succeed in a man's world. Now, suddenly, those goals seemed incomplete. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. 2 days ago, I thought I had it all figured out." A small smile touched Isaac's lips. 2 days ago, I was tracking outlaws alone with no thought beyond bringing them to justice." His expression softened. "Things change quickly sometimes." The implication hung between them, neither quite ready to give it voice. Instead, they rode on, the afternoon sun warming their backs as they approached Silver Creek. They made camp for a brief rest in a sheltered hollow about 5 miles from town, planning to approach under cover of darkness. As Willie tended to the horses, Isaac built a small, smokeless fire to warm coffee and heat their last rations. "Your arm needs tending," he noted, nodding toward the bloodstain on her sleeve where Hawkins' bullet had grazed her. Willie had almost forgotten the injury in the excitement of their escape. "It's just a scratch." "Even scratches can fester," Isaac countered, retrieving a small kit from his saddlebag. "Let me see it." Reluctantly, Willie rolled up her sleeve, revealing a shallow furrow across her upper arm, crusted with dried blood. Isaac worked with gentle efficiency, cleaning the wound with whiskey from a small flask and applying a salve before wrapping it with a clean bandage. His fingers were calloused but surprisingly gentle, their touch sending an unexpected warmth through Willie's skin. "You've done this before," she observed, watching him tie off the bandage. "Too many times," he confirmed, his expression momentarily distant. "The war taught me field medicine whether I wanted to learn it or not." Willie studied his face in the firelight, noting the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. "How long have you been a marshal?" "5 years officially. Before that, I worked with my father when he was sheriff in Missouri." He handed her a cup of coffee. "He was killed trying to stop a bank robbery when I was 22. I joined the army after that, then the marshal's service when the war ended." "I'm sorry about your father," Willie said softly. Isaac nodded his thanks, his gaze distant. "He was a good man. Believed in justice, not just the law." He looked at her directly. "Like your father, I imagine." "Yes," Willie agreed, warming her hands on the coffee cup, "though he was more pragmatic than idealistic. Said the mail had to go through because people needed connections to survive out here, needed to know they weren't forgotten." "Wise man." "He would have liked you," Willie said, surprising herself with the admission. Isaac's expression softened. "I'll take that as a high compliment." They fell into comfortable silence, sharing the simple meal and watching the sun sink behind the mountains. As twilight deepened, they doused the fire and prepared to complete the final leg of their journey. Silver Creek came into view as a collection of twinkling lights in the valley below. A substantial settlement by territory standards with several streets of permanent buildings, and even a small church whose steeple was silhouetted against the night sky. "Judge Crawford's house is on the north edge of town," Isaac said as they approached cautiously. "White house with a porch swing and blue shutters, according to my information." They circled wide, avoiding the main roads and approaching from the hills behind the judge's property. No lights burned in the windows of the large white house, causing Willie to check her father's pocket watch with a frown. "It's only 8 o'clock. Too early for the household to be abed." Isaac's expression tightened. "Something's not right." They secured their horses in a small copse of trees and approached on foot, moving silently through the judge's orchard. As they neared the house, Willie caught the faint smell of smoke. "Fire," she whispered. Isaac shook his head. "Gunpowder. Recent." The back door of the house stood ajar. Drawing their weapons, they entered cautiously, finding themselves in a dark kitchen. Nothing appeared disturbed, but the silence was oppressive. They moved through the house room by room, finding nothing amiss until they reached the study. The door was splintered as if forced open, and papers were scattered across a large desk. Behind it, slumped in a leather chair, was the figure of a man. Isaac moved forward quickly, checking for signs of life while Willie kept watch at the door. "Judge Crawford?" she asked. Isaac nodded grimly. "Dead, single shot to the chest." He indicated a hole in the judge's waistcoat. "Recently, too, body still warm." Someone knew we were coming, Willie realized. They decided to eliminate the recipient rather than risk the evidence reaching him. "Councilman Payne," Isaac suggested, examining the room more carefully. "His name was all over those fraudulent land deals." A noise from the front of the house alerted them, the sound of the door opening and multiple footsteps entering. "Out." "Now," Isaac whispered, guiding Willie back toward the kitchen. They slipped out the way they had come in, just as voices became audible from the study. Willie recognized one immediately: Elias Greaves, the postmaster from Iron Ridge. "I told you they were headed this way," Greaves was saying. "The marshal and the male girl, they have the package." "And I've taken care of it," replied another voice, cold and authoritative. The judge won't be reviewing any evidence now, but they'll go to the sheriff next, a third voice pointed out anxiously. We should have intercepted them on the trail. Patience, gentlemen, said the authoritative voice. They'll have to come into town eventually, and when they do, we'll be waiting. Isaac and Willie retreated silently through the orchard, not speaking until they reached their horses. Did you recognize the other voices? Willie asked as they mounted. Isaac nodded grimly. Edward Payne was one. The other sounded like Sheriff Mills, which complicates matters significantly. If the sheriff is involved, we can't go to the law, Willie concluded. So what now? Isaac considered for a moment. We need to get that evidence to someone who can act on it. The nearest federal judge is in Carson City, 2 days' ride. But first we need to get out of Silver Creek without being seen, Willie pointed out. They'll be watching all the roads. Isaac studied the town below, his expression resolute. Not all of them. There's an old mining road that runs east from behind the church. It's rarely used now that the main strike has played out. Can we reach it without going through town? If we circle around through Widow Jensen's property, yes, he glanced at Willie. It means another night on the trail. She met his gaze steadily. I've survived worse, Marshal Calloway. The hint of a smile touched his lips. Indeed you have, Miss Nash. They guided their horses carefully through the darkness, skirting the edge of town and working their way toward the abandoned mining road. The night was clear, stars blazing overhead in the vast Nevada sky, providing just enough light to navigate by. As they passed the small church on the outskirts of town, Willie noticed a light burning in the attached parsonage. She reined in Penny, considering. Isaac, she said quietly, what about the preacher? Would he be involved in the land scheme? Isaac followed her gaze to the lit window. Reverend Thornton, unlikely. He's new to the area, only arrived 6 months ago, and I've heard he's been outspoken against corruption. Then perhaps we have an ally, Willie suggested, someone who could help us reach Carson City safely. Isaac considered this. It's risky. Anyone in town could be working with Payne. But we need supplies for the journey and information about who might be watching the roads. She met his gaze in the starlight. Sometimes you have to trust someone, Isaac. After a moment he nodded. We'll approach carefully. At the first sign of trouble, we ride. They tethered their horses behind the church and approached the parsonage cautiously. Through the window, they could see a middle-aged man with graying hair bent over a Bible at a small desk. Isaac knocked softly. The scratching of the preacher's pen stopped, and after a moment, footsteps approached the door. Who's there? Called a cautious voice. Friends who need help, Reverend Thornton, Isaac replied, and discretion. The door opened a crack, revealing a careworn face and suspicious eyes that widened in recognition. Marshal Calloway, what in heaven's name? May we come in, Reverend? It's a matter of life and death. The preacher hesitated only briefly before opening the door wider. Quickly then. Once inside, with the curtains drawn, Isaac made the introductions. This is Miss Wilhelmina Nash, mail carrier for the territory. We've uncovered evidence of corruption involving the town council, the railroad, and possibly Sheriff Mills. Thornton's expression grew grave. I've suspected as much. There have been rumors about forced land sales and missing deeds. He glanced between them. But what's happened to bring you here in the night like fugitives? Judge Crawford has been murdered, Willie said bluntly. We found his body less than an hour ago. The color drained from Thornton's face. Dear God, are you certain? Isaac nodded grimly. We were bringing him evidence of the land fraud when we discovered him. Now we need to get that evidence to the federal judge in Carson City, but Payne and his conspirators are watching for us. The preacher sank into a chair, visibly shaken. This is worse than I feared. He looked up at them. "How can I help?" "Supplies for a 2-day journey," Isaac said, "and information about which routes might be watched." Thornton nodded. "I can provide both. But you should know Payne has deputized several men today, claiming there's a dangerous outlaw in the area. They're patrolling all the main roads out of town." "The old mining road to the east," Willie suggested. "Is it watched?" "Not that I'm aware of. It's treacherous in places, washed out in the spring floods, which is why it's seldom used." The preacher rose. "I can give you supplies and a map showing where the road remains passable." While Thornton gathered food and water, Isaac studied a map of the region spread on the preacher's desk. Willie joined him, her shoulder brushing his as they traced potential routes to Carson City. "2 full days of hard riding," Isaac murmured. "If we're not delayed." "We'll make it," Willie said with quiet confidence. "We've come this far." Isaac's gaze shifted from the map to her face, his expression softening. "Yes, we have." Something in his tone made Willie's heart quicken. She was suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool room. The moment was broken when Thornton returned with a bundle of supplies and a smaller, more detailed map of the mining road. "This shows where the bridges are out and where you can ford the creek safely," he explained. "The road rejoins the main Carson City trail about 15 miles east, well beyond where Payne's men are likely to be watching." Isaac studied the map carefully, committing it to memory before folding it and tucking it into his pocket. "Thank you, Reverend. You've taken a risk helping us." Thornton's expression was solemn. "Justice is worth the risk, Marshal. Judge Crawford was a good man and a friend. I want to see his killers brought to account." "We'll make sure of it," Willie promised. They slipped out the back door of the parsonage, Thornton's supplies distributed between their saddlebags. The night remained clear, the moon now risen to provide better light for their journey. The old mining road was exactly where Thornton had indicated, little more than a rutted track winding up into the foothills east of town. They rode single file, Isaac leading, both alert for any sign of pursuit. For the first hour, they pushed the horses hard, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Silver Creek. Once they were well into the hills, they slowed to a more sustainable pace, aware that they needed to conserve the animal's strength for the long journey ahead. "We should rest soon," Isaac suggested as they navigated a particularly steep section of the trail. "The horses need it, and so do we." Willie nodded, feeling the fatigue of the day's events settling into her bones. "There's a sheltered spot ahead, according to the map, Old Miner's cabin." The cabin proved to be little more than 3 walls and a partial roof, but it offered protection from the wind and concealment from the trail. They unsaddled the horses and rubbed them down before securing them with enough lead to graze on the sparse mountain grass. Inside the cabin, Isaac cleared away debris to create a space for them to rest. "No fire," he decided. "Too visible from below." Willie agreed, spreading her bedroll on the cleared ground. The night was cool but not cold enough to risk discovery for the sake of comfort. She sat with her back against one wall, watching as Isaac took the first watch position near the open side of the cabin. "You should rest," she told him. "I'll take first watch." Isaac shook his head. "You're exhausted. I can see it in your eyes." "So are you," she countered. A small smile touched his lips. "Stubborn woman." "Pot, kettle," she retorted, but without heat. In the end, they compromised. Willie would rest for 4 hours, then take the watch while Isaac slept. It was a sensible arrangement, but as Willie settled into her bedroll, she found sleep elusive despite her fatigue. Her mind kept returning to the events of the past 2 days, the ambushes, the discovery of the fraud, the murder of Judge Crawford. And through it all, Isaac's steady presence, his unwavering support, the way he looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. "Isaac," she said softly, knowing he was still awake. "What happens when this is over? After we reach Carson City?" He was silent for a long moment, and Willie thought perhaps he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. "Justice, hopefully. Payne and his conspirators will face trial for fraud and murder." "I meant for us," Willie clarified, surprising herself with her boldness. Isaac turned to look at her, his expression difficult to read in the dim moonlight filtering through the broken roof. "That depends," he said carefully, "on what you want to happen." Willie sat up, drawing her knees to her chest. 2 days ago, I knew exactly what my life would be. Delivering mail until my contract expired, then perhaps renewing it, or finding some other way to make my way in the world. She met his gaze. "Now I'm not so certain." Isaac shifted from his watchful position to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him but not quite touching. "Life has a way of surprising us," he said quietly. "I wasn't looking for anything or anyone when I rode into Skidoo, just doing my job following a trail." "And now," she prompted when he fell silent, "now I'm wondering if there might be more to life than just the job." His hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers gentle as they intertwined with her own. "If perhaps the trail I've been following was leading me to something I didn't know I was seeking." Willie's heart quickened at his touch, at the meaning behind his words. "That's quite poetic for a lawman," she teased gently, masking her own uncertainty with humor. Isaac's smile was visible even in the dim light. "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." They sat in comfortable silence, hands still joined, until Willie felt sleep finally beginning to claim her. Reluctantly, she withdrew her hand and settled back into her bedroll. "Wake me in 4 hours," she reminded him. "I mean it, Isaac. You need rest too." "I will," he promised, though there was something in his tone that made her suspect he might let her sleep longer. Stubborn man, she thought as she drifted off. But the thought was fond, and it followed her into dreams where blue eyes and gentle hands featured prominently. Dawn found them already several miles further along the mining road, having departed the cabin well before first light. The path had become increasingly treacherous, washed out in places just as Reverend Thornton had warned, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through the worst sections. "The map shows the road improving after we cross Cedar Creek," Willie noted as they paused to rest the horses at mid-morning. "Another mile or so ahead." Isaac nodded, studying the terrain ahead. "Let's hope Thornton's information about the ford is accurate." The creek will be running high with snowmelt. They continued on, the trail gradually descending toward a valley where a ribbon of water could be seen winding through the landscape below. As they drew nearer, the sound of rushing water confirmed Isaac's concern about the creek's volume. When they reached the crossing point, they found the remains of an old wooden bridge, its center section washed away by spring floods, leaving only the support posts on either bank. "Thornton's map indicates the ford is upstream, where the creek widens and shallows," Willie said, consulting the rough drawing. They followed the bank for a 1/4 mile, finding the spot where the creek spread out across a gravel bed. The water was swift but appeared shallow enough to cross safely. "I'll go first," Isaac decided, guiding his stallion into the water. "Follow exactly where I cross." Willie watched anxiously as Isaac's horse picked its way across the creek, the water rising only to its knees at the deepest point. When they reached the far bank safely, she urged Penny forward, following the same path. Halfway across, Penny stumbled on a loose stone, nearly losing her footing. Willie held steady, speaking soothingly to the mare as she regained her balance and continued more cautiously. When they reached the far bank, Isaac was waiting to help them up the slippery incline. "Well done," he said, offering Willie a hand as she dismounted to check Penny's leg for injury. Finding none, she patted the mare's neck appreciatively. "Good girl," she murmured. "Just a bit further and we'll rest properly." As promised, the trail improved significantly beyond the creek, becoming wide enough for them to ride side by side. By noon, they had reached the junction with the main Carson City road, finding it deserted as Thornton had predicted. "We should make good time from here," Isaac observed, "barring any unexpected company." They pushed on through the afternoon, alternating between a steady trot and walking to rest the horses. The landscape gradually changed from rocky foothills to more open country, with scattered ranches visible in the distance. They avoided these, staying on the main road but ready to veer into the countryside at the first sign of other travelers. As evening approached, they began looking for a suitable campsite. The day had been uneventful, but both remained vigilant, aware that news of Judge Crawford's murder had likely spread, and that Payne would have extended his search beyond Silver Creek by now. They found shelter in a small grove of cottonwoods beside a stream, far enough from the road to conceal their fire but with clear lines of sight in all directions. While Isaac tended to the horses, Willie gathered wood and started a small cooking fire using supplies from Thornton's provisions. "Real coffee," she said appreciatively as she measured the grounds into the pot. "The Reverend is a true Christian." Isaac smiled, settling beside her as she worked. "And salt pork, hardtack, and even some dried apples. Quite the feast compared to our recent meals." They ate companionably as dusk settled around them, the simple food tasting extraordinary after days of tension and sparse rations. With their immediate hunger satisfied, they lingered by the fire, savoring the coffee and the first real moment of peace they'd experienced since meeting. "If all goes well, we should reach Carson City by tomorrow evening," Isaac said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Judge Wilson is a good man. He'll know how to proceed with the evidence." Willie nodded, staring into the flickering flames. "And then it's over." She glanced at him. "You'll return to your duties, tracking outlaws and bringing justice to the territory." "That's my job," Isaac acknowledged. He studied her face in the firelight. "What about you? Back to delivering mail through outlaw territory?" There was something in his tone, a question beneath the question, that made Willie's heart quicken. "My contract runs for another 6 months," she said carefully. "After that, I'm not certain." "It's dangerous work," Isaac observed, his expression unreadable, "especially for a woman alone." Willie bristled slightly. "I managed well enough before you came along, Marshal Calloway." A smile touched his lips. "That you did. Better than most men would have, truth be told." His expression grew more serious. "But even the best of us can use a partner from time to time." The word hung between them, laden with possibility. "A partner," Willie repeated softly. "What exactly are you suggesting, Isaac?" He set down his coffee cup and turned to face her directly. "I'm suggesting that perhaps our meeting wasn't entirely coincidence. That maybe there's a reason we found ourselves riding this trail together." "Fate?" she questioned, a hint of skepticism in her voice despite the hope rising in her chest. "Providence, my father would have called it." Isaac's hand found hers where it rested on her knee. "I've been alone a long time, Willie, focused on the job, on justice, on the next outlaw to bring in. I wasn't looking for anything else." His fingers tightened gently around hers. "Until I saw a woman outrunning bandits and refusing to surrender her cargo despite the odds." Willie's throat tightened with emotion. "I wasn't looking either," she admitted. "After my father died, I thought it was just me against the world, safer that way somehow." "And now," Isaac prompted gently. She met his gaze directly. Now I'm wondering if perhaps there's something to be said for having someone ride beside you. Someone you can trust." The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across their faces as they regarded each other in the growing darkness. Willie was acutely aware of Isaac's hand still holding hers, of the warmth spreading through her at his touch. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Isaac leaned closer. When she didn't retreat, his free hand rose to gently cup her cheek, his thumb tracing a line along her jawline with exquisite care. "May I?" he whispered, his face inches from hers. In answer, Willie closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as years of solitude and self-reliance melted away in the heat of newfound connection. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you stood your ground against Hawkins in that pass," he confessed. Willie smiled, her hand rising to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. "I've been wanting to let you since you jumped from that ledge to protect me." They spent the night beneath the cottonwoods, taking turns at watch, but always returning to each other's side, as if reluctant to be apart now that they had found each other. By unspoken agreement, they kept their newfound affection chaste. There would be time for more once their mission was completed, once the danger had passed. Morning arrived clear and cool, with dew sparkling on the grass and birdsong filling the air. They broke camp efficiently, both energized by the knowledge that Carson City was within reach and that whatever lay beyond this journey, they would face it together. The road to Carson City took them through increasingly settled country, with farms and ranches appearing more frequently as they approached the territorial capital. By mid-afternoon, they could see the city itself sprawled across a valley, substantially larger than Silver Creek, with proper streets, brick buildings, and the distinctive dome of the courthouse visible at its center. "We should approach cautiously," Isaac advised as they paused on a ridge overlooking the city. "Payne may have telegraphed ahead to contacts here." Willie nodded her agreement. "The courthouse will be closed soon for the day. Perhaps we should wait until morning to approach Judge Wilson." "No," Isaac decided after a moment's thought. "The longer we wait, the more time Payne has to cover his tracks or send someone after us. The judge lives on the west side of town. We'll go directly there." They circled the city, approaching from the west as planned. Judge Wilson's home proved to be a substantial two-story house set back from the road, with a well-tended garden and a stable visible behind the main building. Isaac approached the front door while Willie remained with the horses, both still wary of potential ambush despite having seen no signs of pursuit. A housekeeper answered his knock, her expression suspicious, until he identified himself as a U.S. Marshal with urgent business for the judge. Minutes later, they were seated in Judge Wilson's study, the evidence from the package spread across his desk. The judge himself was a tall, austere man with a shock of white hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing as Isaac explained the situation. "Murder and land fraud," Wilson said gravely when Isaac had finished. "And you say Sheriff Mills is implicated as well?" "He was present at Judge Crawford's home after the murder," Willie confirmed, "and appeared to be working with Councilman Payne." Wilson studied the photographs and documents carefully. "This is compelling evidence, enough to issue warrants immediately." He looked up at them. "You've taken considerable risk bringing this to me." "Justice demanded it," Isaac said simply. The judge nodded, his expression approving. "Judge Crawford was a friend and colleague. I'll see his murderers brought to account." He pulled a bell cord, and moments later the housekeeper appeared. "Martha, Please ask Deputy Marshal Thompson to come here immediately and prepare rooms for our guests. They'll be staying the night." Despite their protests that they could find accommodation in town, Judge Wilson insisted on offering his hospitality, pointing out reasonably that they were safer under his roof than anywhere in Carson City until arrests had been made. "I'll dispatch telegrams to the federal office in Reno immediately," he assured them. "By morning, we'll have enough marshals here to ride to Silver Creek and make arrests." Later that evening, after a proper meal that seemed impossibly luxurious after days on the trail, Willie found herself alone with Isaac on the judge's back porch. The night was warm, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and the dangers of the past days seemed suddenly remote. "It's strange," she said softly, "to be sitting here safely when just yesterday we were running for our lives." Isaac nodded, his shoulder brushing against hers as they sat side by side on a wooden bench. "The law works slowly sometimes, but it does work. By this time tomorrow, Payne and his conspirators will be behind bars. And Judge Crawford will have justice," Willie added. She glanced at Isaac. "What happens then? For you, I mean." He turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about that." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with now familiar ease. "The Marshal's Service has been talking about establishing a permanent office in Reno. They've offered me the position." Willie's heart quickened. "Reno? That's only 20 miles from Skidoo." "Exactly 22 miles, Isaac confirmed, a smile tugging at his lips. "I checked the map very carefully." "A distance easily traveled in a day," Willie observed, trying to keep her tone casual despite the hope blooming in her chest. "Very easily," Isaac agreed. His expression grew more serious. "Willie, I know we've only known each other a short time, but these past days have shown me more about your character, your courage, and your heart than years of ordinary acquaintance could have done." Willie's breath caught as he shifted to face her more directly, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not asking for promises right now," he continued. "Just a chance to see if what we've found on this journey might grow into something lasting." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Would you be willing to explore that possibility with me?" Willie felt a smile spreading across her face, genuine and unguarded in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be since her father's death. "I think," she said softly, "that I would like that very much, Marshal Calloway." His answering smile was radiant. "May I kiss you again, Miss Nash?" Just to seal the agreement, in answer, Willie leaned forward, meeting his lips with her own in a kiss that promised far more than just the exploration of possibilities. The morning brought news that federal marshals had arrived from Reno and were preparing to ride to Silver Creek with warrants for Edward Payne, Sheriff Mills, and 3 other members of the town council. Isaac, as the marshal who had discovered the evidence, would accompany them. "I'll be gone 3 days at most," he told Willie as they stood in Judge Wilson's foyer. "Will you wait for me here?" Willie nodded, though the thought of being left behind chafed at her independent nature. "The judge has offered to arrange transport for me back to Skidoo once it's safe. I have mail routes to complete after all." Isaac's expression softened. "Of course, duty first." He took her hand. "But perhaps when your current deliveries are complete, you might consider taking a day to ride to Reno. I know a marshal there who would be very pleased to show you the city." Willie smiled, squeezing his hand. "I believe that could be arranged." Their goodbye was brief but tender, with promises to reunite soon. As Willie watched Isaac ride away with the other marshals, she felt not the familiar loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long, but a new sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. True to his word, Isaac returned to Carson City 3 days later with news that Payne, Mills, and the others had been arrested without incident, and were being transported to Reno for trial. The evidence they had delivered to Judge Wilson had been irrefutable, and additional documents found in Payne's home had implicated several officials of the Western Pacific Railroad as well. "Justice will be served," Isaac assured Willie as they walked through Judge Wilson's garden that evening. "Though it won't bring Judge Crawford back." "No," Willie agreed soberly, "but it honors his memory and protects others from similar schemes." They paused beneath a flowering apple tree, its blossoms releasing a sweet fragrance into the evening air. Isaac turned to face Willie, taking both her hands in his. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what comes next, for us." Willie raised an eyebrow. "Have you now, Marshal Calloway?" "I have indeed, Miss Nash." His expression was serious despite the teasing note in her voice. "The Reno office is confirmed. I'll be starting there in 2 weeks." "That's wonderful news," Willie said sincerely. "You deserve the recognition." Isaac nodded his thanks but pressed on. "But before I take up the position, I have some leave time coming. I was thinking I might spend it in Skidoo. Getting to know the area, getting to know a certain mail carrier better if she's amenable." Willie's heart quickened at the suggestion. "I believe she would be very amenable to that arrangement." Isaac's smile was warm as he drew her closer. "I meant what I said before, Willie. I don't want to rush this. What's growing between us is too important to hurry." "I agree," she said softly, "but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the journey." His kiss was answer enough, tender yet promising deeper passions to come when the time was right. Willie melted into his embrace, marveling at how completely her life had changed in less than a week. The next day, Judge Wilson provided a carriage and escort to return Willie to Skidoo, with Isaac riding alongside as an additional protection. The journey was uneventful, a welcome change after their previous adventures together. Arriving in Skidoo, they found the small mining town buzzing with news of the arrests in Silver Creek. The local postmaster, Arthur Green, was overjoyed to see Willie safe and sound, having feared the worst when she failed to return on schedule. "Got a stack of mail waiting for delivery," he informed her after the initial greetings. "But it can wait another day if you need rest." Willie shook her head. "I'll start tomorrow as planned." She glanced at Isaac. "Though I may have company on the route if that's acceptable." Green looked between them, a knowing smile spreading across his weathered face. "More than acceptable, Miss Nash. A mail carrier can always use protection in these dangerous times." And so began a new chapter in Willie's life. Isaac took rooms at the Skidoo Hotel while she resumed her mail routes, but he rode beside her each day, a steady presence that made the dangerous trails seem less threatening. In the evenings, they would share meals at the town's small restaurant or, increasingly, at Willie's modest home on the edge of town. They talked of everything and nothing: his experiences during the war, her childhood in St. Louis before her family moved west, their shared love of wild, open spaces and justice. 2 weeks passed in this pleasant routine before Isaac was due in Reno to take up his new position. On their final evening together in Skidoo, he invited Willie to dinner at the hotel, where the owner had prepared a special meal in the private dining room. Willie arrived wearing a dress, a rare concession to femininity that made Isaac's eyes widen appreciatively when she entered the room. "You look beautiful," he said simply, helping her to her seat. The meal was the finest Skidoo could offer: venison steak, fresh vegetables from a nearby farm, and even a bottle of California wine that the hotel owner had been saving for a special occasion. As they finished dessert apple pie with actual cream, another luxury in the mining town, Isaac reached across the table to take Willie's hand. "These past weeks have been the happiest of my life," he said, his voice low and sincere. Willie squeezed his hand. "Mine too," she admitted. though I'll miss having you ride beside me. About that." Isaac took a deep breath, his expression turning serious. "I've been giving it a lot of thought, Willie. The ride between Skidoo and Reno isn't so far, but it's still a separation neither of us wants." "True," she acknowledged, wondering where he was leading. "So I've come up with a solution, or rather, a proposal." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, which he placed on the table between them. A very literal proposal, as it happens. Willie's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I know it's fast," Isaac continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "And I meant what I said about not rushing. But I also know with absolute certainty that what I feel for you isn't going to change or diminish with time. It will only grow stronger." He slid from his chair to kneel beside her, taking the ring from its box. "Wilhelmina Nash, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Not immediately, if you're not ready, but when you are. Whether that's next month or next year, I'll wait as long as you need." Willie looked down at this man who had ridden beside her without being asked, who had protected her and respected her independence in equal measure, who looked at her with a warmth that made her feel truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life. "Yes," she said simply, tears of joy threatening to spill. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Calloway, and I don't think we need to wait very long at all." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the depth of his feelings. They were married 1 month later in the small church in Reno, with Reverend Thornton traveling from Silver Creek to perform the ceremony. Judge Wilson attended, as did several of Isaac's fellow marshals and many of the people from Willie's mail routes, who had come to depend on her reliable deliveries. Willie wore a gown of pale blue silk ordered specially from San Francisco, with her mother's lace veil that had been carefully preserved since her parents' wedding day. Isaac, resplendent in a new black suit, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression of such love and pride that Willie felt her heart might burst from happiness. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love, honor, and protect each other through whatever life might bring. When Reverend Thornton pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers from the assembled guests nearly raised the church roof. The celebration continued well into the evening at a local hotel, with music, dancing, and more food than the small mining communities usually saw in a month. When the newlyweds finally departed for the small house Isaac had purchased on the outskirts of Reno, they were showered with rice and good wishes. Their new home was modest but comfortable, situated on a rise with a view of the mountains to the west. Isaac had furnished it carefully, incorporating pieces from Willie's home in Skidoo along with new items chosen with her preferences in mind. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway," he said softly as he carried her across the threshold in the traditional manner. Willie smiled, her arms around his neck. "It has a nice ring to it, I must say." He set her down gently in the center of their new home. "I have something to show you," he said, taking her hand and leading her to what appeared to be a study at the back of the house. Inside, she found not just a desk and bookshelves, but a large map of the Nevada territory mounted on one wall, with pins marking various settlements and the routes between them. "I spoke with the Postal Service," Isaac explained. "They've agreed to establish a new regional office here in Reno, with responsibility for coordinating mail delivery throughout the Northern Territory." He turned to face her. "They need someone who knows the routes, who understands the challenges of delivering mail in these parts. Someone who's proven they can get the mail through no matter what." Willie stared at him, comprehension dawning. "Are you saying?" "The position is yours if you want it," he confirmed. You'd oversee all the carriers in the region, establish new routes as settlements grow, ensure the mail gets through safely. His expression softened. It means less time on horseback yourself, but your experience would help dozens of other carriers navigate the dangers you faced. Willie moved to the map, tracing the familiar routes with her finger as she considered the opportunity. It was a chance to continue her father's legacy on a larger scale, to ensure connections were maintained between isolated communities, to use her hard-won knowledge to keep others safe. "I'd still ride sometimes," she asked, turning back to Isaac. He smiled. "I insisted on that provision. You'd inspect routes personally, train new carriers in the field. No desk could contain you entirely, Willie Calloway." Her new name on his lips sent a thrill through her. "Then I accept," she said, crossing to embrace him. "Thank you for understanding how important this is to me." Isaac's arms encircled her waist. "We're partners in all things now," he reminded her. "Your passions are mine to support, just as mine are yours." Their kiss sealed this new understanding, this partnership of equals that would define their life together. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. Isaac's position as chief marshal in Reno often took him away for days at a time, while Willie's role coordinating mail service for the territory kept her equally busy. But they always found their way back to each other, sharing stories of their adventures over dinner in their increasingly comfortable home. When their first child arrived 2 years after their wedding, a son, they named James after both their fathers. They adapted their work schedules to ensure one of them was always home with him. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, teaching young James to ride almost before he could walk. The postal network Willie established became a model for other territories, earning recognition from Washington and eventually a commendation from the Postmaster General himself. She never entirely gave up riding the routes, however, insisting on personally checking the most dangerous sections when new threats emerged. On those occasions, Isaac would often ride beside her, just as he had on that first fateful day outside Skidoo. Sometimes they would reminisce about their first journey together, the ambushes, the gunfights, the discovery of Judge Crawford's body, marveling at how what had begun in danger had blossomed into such profound happiness. Their family grew with the addition of a daughter, Margaret, named for Judge Crawford's wife, whose stolen property had brought them together. Like her brother, she inherited Willie's determination and Isaac's sense of justice, eventually following in her father's footsteps to become one of the first female deputy marshals in the territory. As the years passed and the wild frontier gradually yielded to civilization, Willie and Isaac remained constants in a changing world. The mail routes became less dangerous as lawlessness declined, but the importance of maintaining connections between communities never diminished. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they retraced their original journey from Skidoo to Silver Creek, now a comfortable 2-day ride on well-maintained roads. The mining camps had grown into proper towns, and Silver Creek itself had become a respectable city with a new courthouse named in Judge Crawford's honor. They spent the night at a hotel in what had once been Iron Ridge, but was now called Maplewood, a thriving community where Willie's mail organization had its second largest office. As they sat on the hotel's veranda watching the sunset, Isaac took her hand, his touch still sending a familiar warmth through her after all these years. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly, "giving up the solitary life on the trail for this?" Willie smiled, her free hand moving to touch the silver strands now mingling with the gold in his hair. "Not for a moment," she assured him. "The trail brought me to you. Everything since has been the greatest adventure of my life." Isaac's blue eyes, crinkled now with laugh lines but still as bright as when they first met, held hers with the same warmth and devotion that had captured her heart 2 decades earlier. "I love you, Wilhelmina Calloway," he said simply. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Isaac Calloway," she replied, leaning forward to kiss him with the same tenderness as their first embrace beneath the cottonwoods. "Thank you for riding beside me when I didn't know how much I needed you there." As twilight deepened around them, they remained hand in hand. Two people who had found in each other not just love but partnership, respect, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead together. The mail still went through, the law was still upheld, and a love born in the dangers of the Wild West continued to flourish in the changing world they helped to build. It was, they both agreed, the greatest delivery either of them had ever made, the delivery of their hearts to each other, a package more precious than any they had ever carried across the untamed frontier.